It is Quest, the adventure game podcast, brought to you by longer and longer pulls off the theme. Like I'm passing the joint to you. I'm pulling more and more. I want more of the theme. I want more of the royalty free theme.
We paid good no money for that.
No,
and we want to get.
I pay. Well, you didn't pay a red cent. I paid
That's right.
that humble bundle. Where I'm paying the minimum amount. For.
I remember we actually talked about it, and it was such a great charity. All those kids, and Ben was like, $1, please. I will take all of your royalty-free music. And I was like, Ben, I'm willing to chip in if you want to help those kids out. And
it had a higher minimum. Don't. It was $2.
That helps twice as many kids.
$1, one kid. All right, folks, it's Quest, the adventure game podcast. I'm Ben, also known as PS_Garrick on Twitch.
And I am Jess, also known as Decaf Jedi on Twitch, where I stream adventure games and I come here and talk about them.
Yeah, and we're also under those respective names on YouTube as well. You can watch us. Do you think there are? I'd be curious if you're a listener and that hasn't watched either of our streams. I don't think you're out there. But if you are, just send an email to questpodcast@gmail.com because I'm just curious.
And tell us why you aren't watching our streams. If so, what's your problem?
I mean, I know some people have said to me, Ben, I watch all of your streams. I don't need to listen to a podcast.
That makes a lot more sense. It's like, yeah, I've had plenty of exposure to your opinions about adventure games already. I don't need an additional hour per week.
Yeah, or usually hour to hour 20 is the sweet spot for us.
I mean, I think that when we're recording sometimes, and I just kind of tune you out. I'm like, I've heard all of Ben's adventure game opinions already. I'll just wait until it's my turn to speak.
That's the horrible thing. Are you much a podcast listener, Jess?
I am. I listen to some podcasts. I have a long commute to work that I usually fill with podcasts.
See, I have a head full of intrusive thoughts, and I live alone, so I listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm walking around to keep the demons at bay.
Yes.
But and this isn't an original thought. I'm stealing this thought from someone else. So copyright whoever said it. Is that the eventual problem of a podcast? Now, this is our 19th episode, which is, I mean, it feels like, a pretty significant number to me. But that the curse of a podcast that's been running for years is that eventually the hosts kind of run out of all their mildly amusing anecdotes.
Yes. I feel like that happened to me about episode 6.
Yeah.
I'm just on autopilot at this point.
And then we just both have to start experiencing the world more. And we're, I don't know about that.
If I wanted to experience the world, I wouldn't have a podcast.
Have you been paying attention? I don't want to experience that shit. Good Lord.
No, things seem really not great right now. So I'd rather just talk about
pass.
Yeah, I'll pass on real life. And you know what's really interesting is point and click adventure games and stuff like that. I'll choose to live in this fantasy world we've constructed for ourselves.
So Jess, I have an email here. That's right.
There it is.
So this email comes from a gentleman named Brandon, and his email begins. Hey, Quest Podcast. I just wanted to thank you guys for the podcast. I love the topics and watching your gaming streams. So he's a watcher, a viewer.
Good.
A watcher, a viewer, a doer.
A viewer.
A real goldmine of fun for adventure gamers, retro and modern. I particularly enjoyed your AGI game podcast. You offered some great perspectives. I was just curious if you've heard of or tried the KQ6 AGI demake that came out last year. Then a link, which I'll invite our listeners also, KQ6AGI.com. Thanks again for the great content. Take care, Brandon. Now, I went to that website, KQ6AGI.com.
And you were fished.
And I was fished. But also, while I was entering all of my credit card information, I noticed that the gentleman that made KQ6AGI, his name is also Brandon. The email matches. So I see right through your ruse, but also I have heard of this and I have played it even before you sent the email.
Yeah.
So
we've turned the tables yet again.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure like which way the table is going at this point.
So this is a demake of King's Quest VI done in the AGI engine, which was the engine that King's Quest 1 through 3 and a version of 4 was made in. And King's Quest 6 was not.
Yes, decidedly not.
Was definitely not made in that. And it is such a fascinating. I played it for a good afternoon because I like it was a nice little. It was one of those things, and I think this is the treat of a demake, is that you go to each screen and you're just like, oh yeah, that's neat.
So that's how they did that. That's how the lamp guy got demade.
Yeah, and like, and also to kind of live in the fantasy of it's like, if this came out in 1985, what would it be like? Now, I don't know. I don't recall how big it is, so maybe it wouldn't have come out. Like, I don't know how many 5 1/4 floppy disks this would have had to be on. I'm very curious, or if it would have worked on like a PC Junior. It is in AGI. I don't know.
Could be.
Can somebody get? Has someone done that?
Yeah, and if someone could just like crowdfund for us a vintage PC Junior, we would be happy to test it out. Ben, you could have it on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I'll take it on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and the weekends.
That seems a little unfair, but
well, I mean, how are you going to divide up 7 days between 2 people that live 8 hours apart?
That's fair. And I don't have a car, and so you will be doing the driving.
Yeah, how close does the L come to West Virginia? Like if you took the outermost loop.
It'd probably take the red line to 95th, and that is about as the extent of how far the L goes to the south and east.
Okay, so yeah, just get to that station, and then I will drive and meet you there. So it's we're both going as far as we can. But no, this project is fascinating to me too. I mean, on the one hand, you're working with some good bones, right? I mean, King's Quest 6 is a fantastic game.
I don't want to spoil my thoughts on King's Quest 6. Maybe I hate it.
That's a good point. I mean, maybe Ben does hate King's Quest 6. Stay tuned for episode 42 when we will discuss King's Quest 6. It is widely held as a pretty good game, and I mean, this is again that broken record problem you talked about before. I love AGI. I love 16 color graphics. This is a charming project for me. I've only watched a few playthroughs on Twitch of this one, but it's on my list to play sooner rather than later. So it was great hearing from Brandon. Glad to
thank you for reaching out. That was
absolutely.
It's nice to hear from you.
Yeah, everyone go check this game out. You should give it a play.
Jess, I have another question for you. And that question is, what have you been playing?
Video games, Ben.
Great.
Video games.
Well, that's that then. Good night.
Kill the music. No. Lately, just recently, I streamed. And again, I'm cheating here by actually talking about adventure games. I feel like we've been way more on topic already this whole episode. Like, we haven't talked about a sandwich yet.
You know, yeah. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay, yeah, we'll work around to it. But no, I played a little bit of Sierra's Conquests of Camelot recently. I streamed that. And Ben, I don't know your feelings on Camelot. I know you're a longbowsman, and like we'll defend that one. I love Conquest of Camelot.
This feels like at least maybe like a duo episode with the two Conquest games, or maybe both solo. Because like they're both very interesting games. But please continue.
Absolutely. I haven't played Camelot in forever. Going back through it, man, I love it.
So you played it at the time?
I played it at the time.
Wow.
I bought that sucker at release. Like I saw that at Radio Shack, and I was like, I'm gonna gobble that one up.
Yeah, and the box had your tooth marks on it. your teeth meeks.
That's right. I could not resist it. And yeah, I mean, as a kid, it was one of my favorites. But like looking back, I was like, I haven't played this thing in decades. Oh, I loved going back and playing it. And the focus on the history, like I know it's a lot of copy protection, but I dig the history enough there that the copy protection doesn't bug me. I had a really fortunate run with a lot of the arcade sequences. I know when you streamed this a couple of years back, that the arcade sequences were not kind to you. That's correct. Am I remembering that correctly?
That is correct. That's correct.
Yeah, I had an easy run. I got lucky on a lot of the arcade stuff. But even with all that, I feel like the game really rose above it all. I just loved it. It's one that I loved as a kid, and coming back to it, I expected to be like, looking at it through a fresh set of eyes, I'll probably see a lot more of the flaws. Still love it as an adult.
I'm holding back because I could talk about this for the rest of the episode. Maybe we should have made that this episode.
Maybe we should.
But that's
Audible.
fine.
Audible.
Yeah, no, we're not talking about Conquest of Camelot.
So Christy Marks and Peter Ledger.
Conquests of the Longbow, one of the absolute best Sierra games of all time. But we'll get there one day.
We'll get there. Put a pin in it, because Ben, I want to know what you've been playing.
Well, Jess, what I've been playing is so a couple episodes, or one episode ago, or some episodes ago, I don't even remember anymore. I was playing Civ 6 to prepare for Civ 7. So I'm now playing
Civ 8. No? Okay, I misunderstood where that was going.
So I'm now playing Civ 7, and I'm probably going to repeat myself, so I apologize. See, this is the ultimate destiny, as I've said. Just going to be repeating ourselves. We're just going to be ASMR for people that like two male voices, which is, if you like that, you'll love podcasts.
Good news.
So I've been playing Civ 7, and it's a launch Civ. What do you want? I've bought Civs at launch since 4. So 4, 5, 6, 7. That's and they I remember 4 being especially just kind of crummy at launch.
Didn't they overhaul?
The game was good, but it crashed a lot in my recollection. I could be wrong.
And then they overhauled major systems of the game with the later expansion packs and stuff.
Well, that's always the case. That's always the case. That's the case in all of them.
Yeah.
So Civ 7, which to be clear, I haven't played a ton of. I'm 9 hours in, so that is to say I haven't finished a game. But also, it's not that a game has taken me 9 hours. It's that I've had a couple false starts where I was just oh wait, no. And then there was a game that it fucked up one of my save games, and so I had it was either go back to this autosave from many turns ago, and I was I'm not doing that again. I'm not picking it up from there. So anyway, so now I'm Civ 7 is split into ages, which are distinct. If you're familiar with Civ 7, it's split into 3 distinct ages. So I've just started on this game that I'm probably going to complete. the modern age, and I think all their changes are really interesting and cool. I also think that, you know, they're not all there yet, which is the case with launch civs. They like just some stuff. Like a lot of people complain about the UI. I mean, sure, it isn't very communicative in some stuff. Everybody talked about how bad the UI was for so long that I was expecting it to be like way worse than it is. Like I just like it's just not great. As opposed to like I just thought it would just be, I don't know, like just completely incoherent.
Comic
Based off of
Sans,
how,
lots of
based off of how
misspellings.
people talk about it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, like I think all of the changes in it are really interesting and can be done well. I think it's also that, like, it's a shame. I don't know if a Civilization game could ever be made early access, to which I'm sure someone at home is saying, "Oh, well, it is in early access. You're playing it." But like I think about the couple games that Soren Johnson, who developed Civ 4, has done since Civ 4, which is like this Mars trading, off-world trading company, which is amazing. And then Old World, which is also very good. And for both of those, he kept them in early access for a while, and then I bought them at 1.0. And what I got was a beautifully well-tuned game that just felt so nice. And with like a big, complicated rules board game, playing the game and knowing that all of the rules, they all feel very, you know, just nice. There's a nice feel to them. I don't know what the technical term for it is, but they all feel like those two games,
Niceness.
all the rules, yeah, the rule niceness is at like a 10 on both of those. They just have a good feeling. And like with Civ 7, it doesn't have that niceness. It does not have, and it's like if you know, Civ 7, if it was in an actual announced early access for like a year and they're like, oh, we're trying this idea out, we're trying this, and we want to see like, you know, what happens and blah, blah, blah. I think it would make a considerably better game, but I also think that Civilization is too big a franchise for them to ever do that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like the kind of game that you would go early access on, even though it's exactly the kind of game that seems like it would benefit immensely from that.
And again, you know, someone listening is probably saying to themselves, like, yeah, early access is now like the 1.0 version of any Civ game, or at least in the internet era where they just keep releasing patches and X packs and, you know, DLC. Like, that is the early access because, you know, crossed arms, scoffing. It's like a Civ game doesn't really become a Civ game until after the second expansion pack, which is true.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Now, I've read a bunch of reviews of this game. Is it true that civilizational leaders are now divorced from a specific civilization? That's an interesting thing to me.
It is. They're divorced. So what it is that you're a leader and that holds, though I think you can change that too, but I'm not like, but like you're the leader and that holds, and then the civilization, like at the end of an era, that changes. Like you have a limited pool of civs to select from for the next era based off of, and I could be getting this wrong because I'm only in, you know, this more complete game. But I believe that it is based off of, like, your options are two that relate to your leader. Like, so I'm playing as Ben Franklin right now, and in the modern era, I had the option of America, and I had the option of France. And, like, it has a little bit of text, like, that's like one of them is, it's like, Ben Franklin was one of the founding fathers of America. And it's like, okay, got it. And then
I know that. Yeah.
the for France it was Ben Franklin was an ambassador to France or whatever he was. I think he was an ambassador.
I've played Pepper's Adventures in Time. I know all this.
For many years. So it's like it will give, and then it has I think two more or something that are kind of based on your actions in the previous era. So it's like, oh well, you had a big navy, so you could also be this civilization that's very naval focused or whatever.
Navel gazing.
Yeah, the navel gazing civ. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's really cool. Like, there I think are some people who are just outright hostile to all the various big changes. To which I'd say it's like, that's fine. Like, you know, there's a bunch of other great civs, and they all still work largely. Like I've actually been tempted to reinstall Civ 4 because Civ 4 is extremely good. And play that. And I like that all the civs are different. Like they're not each like the same game with like slightly retooled stuff and better graphics. They're all kind of a different game.
Yeah, core mechanics change. Like probably my big like sim game franchise that I've locked into is like I've been a Tropico fan since the beginning, and there the core mechanics have changed very little. Like you're getting,
I would say almost
buildings.
Not enough.
Yeah. I mean, it probably needs more. Like, I mean, it really is like you're getting a few new buildings. Maybe you're getting a couple of new options in your policies, better graphics, some new scenarios and stuff. But the core gameplay is virtually unchanged. I appreciate that the Civ series is willing to, especially around things like how it handles like diplomacy or culture and religion and things like that, just like gut that stuff and start over from installment to installment, sort of in search of what's going to be a little bit more fun and what works best. I mean, at some level, I know that they've like, received criticism. I guess it was 6 where they really changed the combat mechanics and everybody lost their mind.
It was 5 that they changed.
Oh, that was 5 that did that. Yeah, okay.
Stop the music on this.
But no, that I appreciate that. I mean, I love Tropico, and I'll just keep buying those for $49. Yep. Even if they're minimal improvements from installment to installment. But
I mean, also Civ has the 333 rule or 33 rule, which is like 33 new, 33 old, and then 33 reworked, which is like one of those Sid Meier's aphorisms. And I think the lead designer on Civ 7, Ed Beach, said, we probably went more new stuff on this one.
Good.
So yeah, no, I think it's cool. I think it's cool, but I also think that it doesn't have that nice feel.
It'll get there. I mean, that's the nice thing about it.
I have total faith that it will. It will get there. Yeah.
So. It is almost a lock, more so than your average game, that after a couple of patches, this is going to start to fall into place. Because if it doesn't, that's going to be a real departure from, at this point, decades of this pattern unfolding.
And having played launch civs and knowing that the game you get, day one is very different. I went into it expecting that, and I was not surprised. All right, so Jess, I have a terrible announcement. I have something really tragic to tell you. I have something really horrible. A very sad thing.
Let me sit down.
Yeah, you know what? Because normally we both do this standing up.
Yes.
All right, Jess, are you seated?
Yes. Okay, Ben.
And okay, let me get in my lazy boy. Okay, and let me kick the feet up. Great. The tragic news is adventure games have died.
What?
That's right. They're dead.
It's going to be bad for our podcast.
Well, I mean, listen, I got I don't know, 3 years out of doing a podcast out of a long dead TV show. I got a cartoon a year ago, but I don't count that.
But no, adventure games are dead, is what you're telling me.
They died. They're dead. I buried them.
Now, you see, I disagree.
What?
I think adventure games are alive, but they deserve to die.
We didn't talk about that part, but I thought you were kind of positing yourself into that we're gonna do like a point counterpoint, and I was like, oh, that would be fun. Like it's like Jess will be on the side of they're not dead, and like I'll be like the crossed arm people. It's like they don't make games like Monkey Island anymore. And but you went in a completely unhinged direction, which was a delight.
Yeah, no, I think this genre has run its course. I think that development on all future adventure games should shut down immediately.
yeah, well,
And you know why?
why?
Because I said so. And I'm just, yeah, there you have it. I think it's time. I think it's time for a change. I need to move on with my life. And if people keep making adventure games, I'm just going to keep circling this drain, possibly until, the day I die.
Yeah.
It's
And
inescapable,
then you'll
Ben.
be buried next to adventure games.
In that very cool retro game graveyard. Yeah, no, this narrative that adventure games are dying or have been dead has been kicking around for what, a quarter century or so now.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, it's
because adventure games died. So let's rewind a smidge and say, when is the time that you would say within the popular imagination that adventure games died? If you're somebody that would announce adventure games are dead, when did they die?
ooh, if I had
At
to
what time?
at the time of death
Yes,
is 4:30
Dr.
p.m.
Dr.
Uh
Morrissette.
yes, that's right. I mean, if I'm going to find this like cutting off point, I'm thinking like 98, 99. The talk had been there for maybe a year or two at that point, but I feel like it's right around 98, 99 that they're really being pronounced dead. Already, like there have been people fretting about it as first person shooters rose to popularity a few years earlier and stuff. But by 98, 99, I think this narrative that adventure games are dead had really set in the gaming press. It was starting to set in on the internet as well. What do you think, Ben? Where would you pinpoint
Yeah,
this?
I would say I like so when did because so there's the day that everybody like not ev- like that everybody or like the people in Oakhurst or whatever like got laid off at Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
And when was that? Was that 98, 99?
Think that was 99 when they did the final cuts. I mean, they've
Yeah.
been slowing down adventure game development for a few years at
But
that point, but I think it was 99 that maybe they axed everybody.
so you could say it's like, oh well, it was when they did that. But then also like to what you were kind of like you were starting to say is that it's like, well, I mean, even before that, like it's like, okay, you could tell that they were trying to get out of it because or either they were trying to get out of it or they were trying to find ways to make them survive, like
To
trying.
reinvent it or, yeah, get out of it, one or the other. A little bit of both, it looked like at Sierra was the case at the time. Like, we're trying to develop a whole lot of these non-adventure titles.
Well,
And
and you have like so the last King's Quest is this like action game with like an RPG type like progression system kind of. And then the last Quest for Glory is definitively a Quest for Glory game. Like it doesn't, you can't say like in King's Quest you're like but they tried to add this multiplayer component that never that never shipped. I think it was in a demo.
yeah. And
Uh,
even like the Space Quest 7 game that was under development and eventually canceled. I mean, the idea there was some sort of multiplayer
right.
scheme. Everyone was going to be a clone of Roger Wilco, and presumably a lot of the adventure game elements, therefore, would have to be sort of downplayed in favor of whatever probably more action oriented mechanics would go on to replace it. So, yeah, I mean, already Sierra was making these sorts of shifts. By this point, LucasArts was starting to focus more of its attention
On Star
toward
Wars.
Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, this is
Yeah.
around the time the prequels are hitting too, right?
Yeah.
This is so they're in a big boom of Star Wars games around this time. Yeah, I guess for LucasArts, it's fun to
Because
point fingers at the games that killed adventure gaming, but Grand Fandango is one that oftentimes is singled out as a very expensive game that was
I think they said
beloved
it
by
sold
critics.
well. I think they
What's
said
that?
it sold okay. I think
I think at the time it was reported it sold kind of poorly.
mm,
I think that one of the numbers I came up with was around 95,000
oh, that's
by
not good.
the year 2000. I think that later a lot of the people who worked on this have gone back and said, well, actually the sales weren't quite as dismal as was reported in the media at the time. But I do think it was an expensive game. It was a game that got glowing reviews, but didn't catch on in the way that I think a lot of people expected it to. I know it gets pointed out occasionally as a game that signaled, oh wow, the money that it takes to develop adventure games versus the sales we can expect from them by the turn of the millennium makes
And
it a bad business proposition.
and then they have Escape from Monkey Island, and then they had two other games that were in like two other sequels that were in development. They had a Sam and Max, which I
And a full
remember I was
throttle.
watching. I think they had even a website for the Sam and
I
Max
think they did.
sequel,
That sounds
and I
now that
remember
you mention,
checking that website constantly because I was
yeah.
so excited. Like I was like, "Oh my god, there's going to be a Sam and Max, and it's going to be 3D," and then oh my god,
Can you imagine a 3D Sam and Max game?
I can't. And then yeah, there was a Full Throttle, which I know it like didn't go through because Full Throttle was like their last like that did really well, I believe. Again, this is entirely from memory, but I believe Full Throttle did well for LucasArts.
I believe so. That sounds right to me too. But
And but I think they like it also had like a little more of an action. I don't know. I don't know what the like. I think there's some concept art for Full Throttle 2 out there and
yes,
like some design documents. I'm not entirely sure what that would have. But it doesn't matter. Neither of them happened. Uh,
yeah, exactly. Because adventure games are dead.
and then you had the longest journey, which came out then, and like that felt also like because I got it at the time, I got it at release, and like that was a big chunky like regardless of however you feel, it did mark the end for a while of like a full fat like game that has like a big budget and is very long. Like say The Longest Journey. Like The Longest Journey gets a sequel, but it was more puzzle light and had really unpleasant action sequences.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like The Longest Journey is like one of our last high profile. I mean, I don't know if I'd call it triple A, but certainly like, there's a budget behind this thing. I think it's one of the last big ones for a few years there. And I guess one of the questions that leads to is, you know, what killed adventure games exactly, or what made us believe that adventure games were dead at this point. Now, I want to go on record here. I don't want to start beef with Old Man Murray, but famously, Old Man Murray, a website dedicated to gaming commentary around the turn of the
Don't
millennium.
go back and read those. They've some of them have aged poorly.
Yeah, they lay the blame squarely at the feet of moon logic puzzles, and especially, this is the
Gabriel Knight
article.
3, it just took a
That's
big
the
jump on Gabriel Knight 3.
yeah, a bunch of like cat hair mustache talk is a big part of this, and I don't think this is a compelling argument for why adventure games went away. I think the idea that one game had a few bad puzzles that caused caused an entire genre to go away feels like a bit of a stretch. Again, it's satire. This is an exaggeration for the point of driving home this argument.
I
Moon logic had been such a part of this genre forever. I don't think that is what drove people away from it.
I don't. I think it. Listen, I'm not a sales analyst, but I mean, I think it's a combination of things. I think I've read again. These are not original thoughts. Like the like adventure games were, and I'm sure you've seen this, Jess. I'm absolutely sure you've seen this like the Sierra video about how like cutting edge they are that they put out in like 1993 or 94, where it's like Roberta Williams being like graphics. We always have the cutting edge graphics. It's like I was the first person to put graphics in an adventure game. I was a like and like adventure games were kind of the front guard for a lot of computer technology. So it was like types of graphics, and then it's like wow, like higher res, and then voice acting. Like they were interesting showpieces.
Yeah, full
Uh,
motion video eventually. Yeah, they were really on the cutting edge in a lot of ways.
and whether or not the people that bought those games or got them bundled with their computer to kind of show off whatever the capability was, it's like, oh my God, like it comes with like, my computer comes with Mist or my computer comes with whatever. Um, like eventually you could, adventure games not only were not the showpiece genre anymore, but also like when they tried to fit in at well, like within the new design look, it's like, all right, well, we're going to do Gabriel Knight in 3D. It looks terrible and it controls terribly.
It
Like,
looks worse than the two games that preceded it.
right. Like, and and that's looking back from 2025. That's kind of unfair. It's like at the time I remember being excited by anything in 3D. Like it's like, oh my God, it's in 3D. Like I remember seeing a lot of things that today I'd be like, that's hideous. Where it at the time it was just exciting because it was in 3D.
Yeah,
Um but like,
I want to put my voodoo card to its limits.
oh my God. Oh, it was so cool. That seeing that 3D effects logo before you
Oh
started a
yeah,
game. Oof, ooh,
it's good
you knew
stuff.
you were in for a good time.
Oh yeah,
Like we had this monster 3D card that had 2 megabytes of video RAM. Oh my. Um
man, that thing would play a blazing round of Daikatana.
it was we played the racing game, the pack-in game for our 3D card. So here you go. The pack-in game that came with our first 3D card was a racing game. Was this game Whiplash. I don't know if you ever
Yeah,
played that. Um and I remember seeing Whiplash in like Voodoo 3D for the first time and being like, this is like I'm at an arcade, the place where you would see the best graphics. Like
that's right.
in
Yeah,
my house.
yeah.
Like and uh yeah, I don't know. I think but I'm sure also that because adventure games are not fun if you're stuck, and like if you're broadening out the audience. Now, some people have said it's like, well, it's because people got stupider that got computers.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm
I mean,
not
that was
saying
definitely
that.
like you were living on forums around this time, just like I was, I think. I mean, that was a lot of the breakdown of this. It's like we have first person shooters now. And if you were on an adventure game forum, the talk was that's for stupid people.
Yeah,
Like if like Doom, Quake, whatever one you want to pick out of the pile, like that's for dummies and us true geniuses.
yeah,
Will cling
sophisticate.
on. Yeah, that will cling to this adventure genre forever. Ben. So, I mean, you talked about the business side of this. Yeah, I do think that something that happens around this same time is like as we're moving into the 2000s, kind of as I understand it, the middle market for game development also fell out a little bit. Like we enter into an era where it feels like the business shifts toward the development of giant AAA games and then much smaller indie titles and casual stuff. And increasingly, as we go forward through that timeline, moving toward mobile games and things like that. And adventure games had always kind of occupied that middle market position. And I think in a lot of ways, there wasn't perceived to be a lot of value. I mean, adventure games, especially if you're doing a 2D adventure game, the cost of developing those assets, of generating all that art, of getting voice work recorded and stuff,
Think about
these are pretty
Toonstruck.
costly. What's
Think
that?
about Toonstruck.
Yeah, I mean, think
Like
about
Toonstruck
Toonstruck.
was absurdly expensive, and it
Mm-hmm.
looks expensive. That's a triple A adventure game. I mean, the like Phantasmagoria and like the FMV, like Sierra tented they had tenter hooks.
Yes.
Sierra tended to really put their full ass into uh at least some of their adventure games. But man, Toonstruck, like, I think you could look up what the budget was, and it's still impressive. Even like, it has this great cast. It still looks remarkable. Like, it is such a
Oh,
good looking game. The animation in it is so like smooth. Like the art is wonderful. Like as a game, it didn't really do much for me, but I was so impressed playing it. Like I felt like I was having like, I was at like a very fine dining restaurant.
no, I mean, it's a great example because ultimately it's incredibly expensive. It doesn't sell all that well. This is, I think, the fear that a lot of developers got into. You can't make a game that looks as good as Toonstruck, or you can't make a game even like a Curse of Monkey Island, for instance, if you aren't sure that you can get the sales numbers to justify that on the back end. And as the costs began to scale up, I think that the math quit making sense in a lot of ways, and
And
that's when
that's
you,
something we're seeing now, like in
yeah,
development.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the story, I suspect, for all of the history of the video game industry. I mean, now we're in a bizarre world where a game
Where
like
Marvel Rivals things will
exactly
get.
that's
Yeah,
what I was
yeah.
going for. It can be wildly successful,
Beat you.
and yeah, then it's like, well, this is great. This is really a triumph. Everyone in the world's playing this and talking about it. Time to start laying off studios and just it's unfathomable. I don't know, like I don't know how many business degrees it would take to understand some of these decisions.
My
And you and I
MBA
only
has
have
an
a few.
MBA. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have two MBAs. Jess, of course, has an
I played
MBA.
in the NBA. Yes.
Yeah, Jess played in the NBA.
but no, I think that seeing this shift over time, I mean, it's when we start seeing, editorials pop up in a lot of these PC gaming magazines about the death of adventure games. There are fewer games being made, and we have some high profile flops and other genres, especially first person shooters. And then as we start to see like, all the rage around games like Tomb Raider and some things like that start to take center stage, and adventure games start to feel a little bit old fashioned. And that's when everyone pronounces them dead.
And it's funny because it's like even then, like so adventure games as a genre, uh
An
had this
oeuvre?
no, not yet. Had a fallow period for a bit, but I mean you can't even say that there was still adventure games being made. It was just not like by like these massive American studios. They were still popular in like Germany, and they were still popular internationally some places. And so
That's
they were
right.
still being made. Like I remember there I constantly reference the digital antiquarian on here because I really like that blog. And he recently did a post about I think he's actually still in a series uh about like the RPGs are dead like post that era, like when they
Uh-huh.
came back. And somebody wrote this very long and thoughtful comment like in the comment section, and that's one of the few blogs where I will say read the comment section because they're usually very interesting
Absolutely.
and not like a series of slurs.
Yes.
uh,
They're very interesting comments and then occasionally slight editing suggestions for typos and
and he
stuff.
always says thanks, it's very sweet.
Yeah, it's very kind.
But somebody wrote like this long response which is just like, this is a very like kind of American point of view. This is
Ah,
kind of a myth. There were still RPGs being made and played on computers like in other countries. You're looking at it from a very limited point of view, and this again, this is from recollection, so apologies if I'm mischaracterizing that commenter's remarks. But like
the point
that is to
stands.
say, like it's like there's still Siberia, not
Yeah,
like the game, not the region.
that's where we should
Uh,
send adventure game developers straight to Siberia for their crimes. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, you've got Broken Sword sequels that are coming out, after the supposed death.
Not
You've got
particularly good ones, but they
no,
came.
but you've got Dreamfall. You've got all kinds of stuff. I mean, I think this is a really good point. I don't part of me thinks that when we talk about the death of adventure games, what we are actually talking about is simply the death of adventure games at LucasArts and Sierra. As you said
Yeah,
before, a couple of North American companies quit making these games. And granted, they were the companies most closely associated with the genre by that point, but they never quite disappeared. And it's not like a lot of these titles that are being developed in by European studios at this point are necessarily obscure titles. I mean, these things are getting American releases. These things are showing up on shelves at Walmart. It's not like you have to go and get an imported copy of Siberia. They were selling it on the shelves at Best Buy and Walmart and other fine retailers. These were widely available and selling respectable numbers at the time.
there were a bunch of like little like you have stuff like the Nancy Drew games, which I played one of them and didn't particularly like it, but again, like it's just to the point where it's like, well, they're out there, and it was also at this time, and so this is so generally we can agree that within the popular imagination, adventure games die at the close of the 20th century. Uh
A
and
20th century art form, the adventure game.
and then but in addition to that, there are a bunch of smaller international studios and smaller like studios like here in the US uh making games. And I mean, I'll like I will say I don't know if I've played that many games from the aughts that I
Uh
particularly
huh.
like. But maybe I just haven't looked hard enough. Um, but there was also you start to get into the AGS games at that time. Let me see. I think AGS is made um let's see, Adventure Game Studio. I've got Wikipedia. This is
Oh
live
man.
Wikipedia searching. The initial release, according to Wikipedia, of AGS was released in 1997.
That's
Um,
wild. That's like 5 years before I would have guessed at least.
and then, but the first, according to this, the first complete AGS game, according to this, comes out in late '99. And then this is when I it caught my attention, which is that Yahtzee puts out the Rob Blank games. uh, in in 2000, I think. And I was actually talking to our friend Michael recently, and they've been playing through some of those early AGS games lately.
Oh, that's fascinating. See,
Um,
I missed out on this early AGS revolution. Yeah, this is an area that I was just not like the aughts were a time when I just wasn't playing a lot of adventure games. I kind of drifted away from the genre for a little while, even a little bit into the tens. So like I knew AGS was happening out there, but I just wasn't checking these games out. And I should go back and revisit some of these early landmark games.
I um the all the Yahtzee ones are like at the time they were considered extremely good. I have not revisited like them recently, but I remember like they were so impressive. The so AGS, for those of you not familiar, like you might be familiar, if you've played Blackwell or really most independent adventure games these days, or a lot of them anyway, are made in it's the engine that runs them. It's a fairly straightforward engine to make games in, which is why a lot of people got into it. And at that period in the from like the year 2000 on, there was, and I'm sure there are still people doing like free games with it, but I haven't been
Yeah.
keeping an eye on it. There was this scene of people making these freeware adventure games, and they were, I played a ton of them at the time. uh I played, uh I was so fascinated by those games, because they it was so exciting that there were new adventure games, but they were also new adventure games made by people my age, like made by people that played adventure games. And they also, they were all very handmade, like they had like MS Paint
Yes.
aesthetics.
That's the aesthetic I imagine when I think about this era.
Yeah, and honestly, that's something that I think that's aged like a fine wine.
Yeah.
Playing a game that, uh, you know, that somebody that's like 16 years old, or like probably like 16 to like early 20s, probably I would guess,
Mhm.
like drew an MS Paint or something like that, maybe a pirated version of like an earlier like Photoshop, and it has that kind of, you just know it, you're
Yeah.
familiar with what the spray paint spray is.
Yes, you can spot that anywhere. Absolutely. Yeah, you can that particular collection of pixels is very recognizable.
Yeah. And I mean, and I remember, through through your website, I got to know of those two AGI, Space Quest fan games.
Yeah, The Lost Chapter and Space Quest Zero Replicated. Both impressive games. Replicated in particular is a really fun little romp.
And it was, so that period I don't really think about like the commercial releases, because I didn't I played a few of them, and they didn't do too much for me. But all of the fan stuff was exactly what I was looking for at that time. Not entirely just because they were free also, but that helped because I was 16 years old.
Yeah. No, I mean, and this is fascinating. I mean, we've got that boom going on basically as adventure games are being declared dead, at the turn of the century. That boom is happening. I was looking up some of the numbers on this earlier. You know, it's in 2001 that the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series launches.
Got that at release on
Yeah, and
in the
as
US.
we get later in the aughts, by then Professor Layton is out there. Both sort of interesting spins on the adventure genre. They're not point and clicks in the traditional sense, but
And
very
also
popular
international.
series.
Like,
That's
they're
right.
not from America. Like, so it's like, you can't say it's
Mhm.
gone. You could just say that it's like they're just not being
Yeah.
made by EA, you know?
And then here's what really fascinated me. So we're declaring adventure games dead, 1999, 2000. Sam and Max Save the World from Telltale Games is releasing by 2006.
Yeah,
Like,
and I played that at the time. That came on that was on GameTap, which
yes,
was a early game streaming service, but not really a game streaming service. It was just like a front end where you would download the games
yeah,
and you
sort
played a
of a digital
subscription.
storefront. Yeah,
Yeah, like you paid a subscription, so all the games on it, which it had a remarkable catalog,
yeah.
like including like it had like Dreamcast games on it. Like it had some really cool stuff on it, and then yeah, Sam and Max and American McGee's Alice. Uh, was it no, not Alice? It was American McGee. Like he had like some sort of game on it. Alice was a game he did before that, but he had some like it was a fairy tales game or something like this
Gotcha.
twisted fairy tales game.
Yeah.
Those were the originals on it, and I remember like getting game tapped so I could play the new Sam and Max because I was so heartbroken that the Sam and Max didn't come out, and I was like, oh, finally, they're doing it. They're doing it.
See, I think that I played the first episode of that, which I think at some point was part of a free trial or something. I seem to remember playing the first episode of Sam and Max, and then didn't revisit it again until years later when the remaster came out. But again, that's 2006. This idea that I mean, if adventure games were dead, they didn't stay in the grave very long, right?
Well, the funny thing is that I played it, and at the time I was just kind of like it really I was just kind of disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm playing it now on my stream. I'm playing those really great Skunk Ape remasters. I'm playing the first season right now on my stream.
Shout out to Skunk Ape.
And uh I think it's so funny, and I think like it I mean it looks great, but that is like the remaster. I think the visual upgrade is so well done.
Yeah.
But I mean, the writing is so they changed a couple jokes and one of the voice actors, but in largely like it's a similar product. And I think at the time, and I know I wasn't alone in this. At the time, it just kind of felt like I was getting in the same way that if you played like some of those point and click, like those lower budget non-Sierra, non-LucasArts adventure games that came out in that like kind of interim
Mhm.
period. Uh, the, it felt like I was playing like a lesser than product.
It felt a
Like
little budgety to you?
it felt a little too budgety, especially like if you compare to and like as we're speaking, you're playing on your stream. I was having fun watching you last night. The Hit the Road, and like Hit the Road still looks incredible. Like this
Yeah, Sam Max
92,
hit the road,
ninety
amazing.
three, like it just has this really beautiful art style. And like I just remember thinking like it's like you got a handful of locations. Each game can be completed, like each episode can be completed in like 2 hours, 2, 3 hours.
Mhm.
uh the voices are wrong because they're not the same ones from Hit the Road. And I'm like, I
Uh-huh.
hate the voices, they're not the right voices. And I just remember being like kind of like I played it, and the Abraham Lincoln episode and the following one, they brought me in because they were a lot
Ah,
more elaborate. That's episodes 4 and 5. but like especially those first three, I was just like, bleh. And the funny thing is now playing it, I'm like, I would love to play a game that's like an adventure game that's just a couple little pleasant bites as opposed to like
Oh my
playing
lord.
it and it's
Yeah.
you have these nice you could finish each episode in like a little sit down, maybe two if you're having, some trouble with the puzzles, and it's like, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, I think I said this on our Discord recently. I don't think I've ever been angry at an adventure game for being too short. There's something beautiful, especially as I've aged into, someone who's in my twilight years now.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is it for you.
yeah, then and yeah, an hour and 45 minutes. Yes, please. I want a story with a beginning, middle, and end that I can complete in less than 2 hours. Absolutely. Give me that every day. And it works really great for streaming too. It's really a win-win all
Yeah,
around.
the
But
first season is a lot of fun too because it's like it's by design very formulaic, and by design it's just like episodes of a sitcom, and I think that's what they had in mind, I
yeah.
believe. And uh for all the people that felt that they were being ripped off like me, like each subsequent season, like in seasons 2 and 3, are way more elaborate.
Yes.
Like
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was just thinking, isn't it wonderful that here in the mid aughts, we're going back, we're going to dip into the original golden age of adventure games. We're going to pluck out a game to create a new sequel to. How perfect is it that like Sam and Max is the property that comes back? Just what a fantastic series, and just wonderful couple of characters. It's good that if adventure games are going to be dead, that Sam and Max don't stay dead very long.
yeah, and I mean at the time it felt like it was forever, but also I mean like the first like Hit the Road is 93, and
Yeah, that's a big gap, and
yeah.
I mean, but also we were like tiny children and young adults, and like a small gap of a few years
Oh yeah.
feels feels like a lifetime. You know, and by the end of the aughts, I guess 2009, we've got Tales of Monkey Island coming out, and it's really going to
Which
set
again
the
at the time I didn't like, and then I've gone back and played and been like, bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I was wrong.
yeah,
I was so rude to
yeah,
Telltale Games. I think
I,
a lot of people owe
yes,
apologies, and I include myself in this.
yeah.
Owe apologies to Telltale Games. They did really good work, and I'm sorry.
I think it's also important for those listening. A lot of the opinions that Ben's expressing now will also turn out to be wrong in the long run. I mean, he has a proven record, as he's just stated,
Yeah.
of being incorrect about adventure games. So, just stick around. His opinions change like the weather.
But then, so
As we get to 2010s.
we start to, then we enter, and we've talked about this already, but this is when the beginning of, and actually again, this is probably another case of that the first one is actually way earlier than I thought. Like, so you have uh time to open uh time to open Wikipedia again. So you
Do,
have the
do, do,
Shiva, which
do,
is
do.
a commercial game, and that comes out in 2006.
Wow.
Uh, and I don't know actually if uh the first version of, like, because there's the Shiva and then there's the Shiva kosher edition, which like he redid the graphics. I don't recall if the original version is was on sale. I'll say it is. But also, I mean, the first Blackwell game comes out in 2006. So whatever, doesn't matter. We've already talked
Yeah.
about the Blackwell Legacy, but those are AGS games, and those are also pretty short. You just played Legacy. to
Yeah,
fulfill the legacy from our earlier podcast. And that was that one stream? Was that a
it
one
was. It was
streamer?
like a good 2 hour stream
Yeah.
that probably should have been an hour 45, but I was really struggling toward the end.
Yeah, it's a one streamer. I would say probably the second game and maybe the third game are also one streamers.
Hmm.
Maybe the third is like one and a half. But like so you start to like once especially Steam allows people like you don't have to go through like a shady website because that kind of prevented me from buying some of those AGS games. And also, I was like, AGS is a free game platform. Why would I pay for something when people are making free games?
That's
That's
right. You're
why
not a
Harlan
sucker.
Ellison got so pissed off about people working for free. Um, but like I was just kind of like, well, AGS is for free games. Why would I get that? But then also, and I think and in a chat that I had, like not on this podcast, but like Francisco brought that up. Grundislav brought that up like in a conversation once. It's like, oh well, also like then adventure games started to go on to Steam and that also kind of changed how things were.
Absolutely. I mean, by the time, Blackwell and the Wadjet games in general are ahead of the curve on this. But I think by the time we get to the 2010s, we see this, indie boom, sort of an indie renaissance in adventure gaming that really takes hold. I mean, there's some high profile games. I'm thinking of like a Broken Age, which famously, rose to prominence on the back of a Kickstarter. That's by 2014. You've got games like Firewatch in 2016, Thimbleweed Park in 2017, some high profile indie stuff. You've also got big studios dipping in this. I mean, by the 2010s, Telltale is booming like crazy. The Walking Dead is 2012. Wolf Among Us is 2013. By 2015, Life is Strange has entered into
Life
the
is
picture.
Strange is 2015.
Ben, Life is Strange is 2015.
Jesus.
I know
Another
that's
thing
hard to
that I
believe.
thought was a lot sooner than it was.
Yeah,
Holy shit, that was 10 years ago.
yeah. And then you've
Fuck.
got like big wild budget stuff. Like, I mean, LA Noir has some adventure game elements
That first
incorporated into it. You've got games
life
like Heavy Rain that are offering some cinematic choice driven narrative adventure kind of stuff. I mean, the 2010s is full of a mix of very traditional point and click games and then games that increasingly are, like Walking Dead or Life is Strange, that are building on the narrative focus of adventure games with maybe lighter puzzle elements incorporated at the same time. I mean, for a dead genre, there are a lot of pretty big games happening around this time.
and 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 now can we jump to now or do you have more to say about the last decade? Um
Jump to right now.
I like listen, and this is, you alluded to it. I'll allude to it, like I'll say it. Like I'm gonna say it now and with my whole chest here
Just
that
say it, Ben. Just say
the
it.
games being the adventure games being made now that you can find now on itch and steam and GOG and wherever else you look are better. They are better now. These are better games. They have more thoughtful design. That is not to say that the games made before were bad. It's not to attack, like, especially a lot of those developers are still around.
Yeah.
It's not
Wow, Ben,
me.
why do you hate Day of the Tentacle so much?
It's just, it's like, listen, have you ever watched the Coles do their Twitch stream? They're a very sweet old couple.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Why
like,
do you
how could
hate
you
all
be
their
saying
games?
how can you be saying that to this remarkably nice people?
Yeah. but
and,
he's saying it and he's going to stand by it. So go ahead. What do you hate about the Coles?
they seem like the nicest people.
They really do. They honestly do.
They
I mean,
seem-
and seem like they've been the nicest people for decades now. Like I've never heard anything bad about. It would be fun to have like a big feud between our podcast and the Coles, but I feel like we're going to lose a lot of a lot of
I would
goodwill
pick
in
the
that
Cole
argument.
side.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I would quickly turn against you and join the Coles.
But the games being made now, like obviously, we talked about Hypnospace Outlaw, which I've said is one of my absolute favorite games, like made.
Yeah,
Uh, the Hypnospace Outlaw. You have, I mean, the previous game that Jay Tholen worked on, Dropsy. I think that's a remarkably good game. There's a lot of great like Locomotive,
yeah,
which we played, and not only that, the games coming out now, I would like they are like I don't feel like I'm being like cheated by length or looks or anything like as a player. Like everything looks really good. Stuff they're in not entirely, but like you're also starting to get games where that play a little more out of the kind of there's the indie game adventure aesthetic, which is a very like stuck to 1992 like VGA pixel look,
uh huh.
and now you'll play games that are, and not again, not to say that there there weren't games that were playing outside of this before. It's just that you're like I'm seeing more games now, or at least ones that attract my attention that look that have a aesthetic of their own that isn't trying to either evoke 1993, nor are they trying to be like, oh, like this is like I'm doing the most cutting edge technology. They look like a game that's an adventure game made in 2025.
Right. They have a thoughtful artistic aesthetic that they pursued in service of their own game rather than to remind people of a game they loved 30 years ago. Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for that. I mean, yeah, I think what fascinates me about the modern era is just the amount of variety that's out there. If you want a game that feels a lot like the Sierra and LucasArts games that you loved, those are out there. I mean, Locomotive very much feels like it could fit right into the LucasArts catalog in a lot of ways. It definitely has those sorts of vibes. If you want something way more experimental, you can take like a Kentucky Route Zero, or you could take,
Another one of my favorite games
yeah.
of
I mean, even if you want to
the
like throw
last 25
Disco
years.
Elysium into sort of an RPG adventure combo of sorts, I mean, you can go in some pretty weird places. There's a
There's
lot more
the Inkle
diversity.
games, which
Yeah,
are take a like that's the Inkle people come out of like interactive fiction text adventures and like the the scene from there, and then made their own kind of, they made the ink engine, which has its own very specific look and feel, and then they've been even doing more like kind of wild and experimental games, from starting from adapting adventure books like the sorcery
yeah,
books, and then they did like Overboard, which is just a remarkably fun and clever and strange game, and 80 Days, which I adore, and like they've been doing great work. Highland Song, I think, was a recent one that I played a
hmm
bit of. I forget its title. Highland something. That was
yeah.
really good.
But no, I mean, and I think it's worth saying too. Not only do you have all this variety, but you also have such a more diverse group of
Right.
developers who are creating these games, which means you're going to get the kinds of stories that wouldn't have been told back in the early 1990s, which is fascinating as well. I mean, Can you imagine in 1993 playing a game set in Canada? But here we have the Crimson Diamond now. Anything's
I didn't
possible.
know what Canada was in 1993, and I went
Nobody did.
to Niagara Falls.
Yeah, but you stayed on the U.S. side.
Yeah, that's famously the place where you get the good view.
That's right. That's exactly right. But no, I mean, this is, I think, one of the advantages of what I would argue is a second golden age of adventure games that we're living in right here and now. I mean, I think that describing this genre as dead, or boy, I'm someone who has built like so much of my online persona, my brand, if you will. You know how I like to think about branding, Ben. I'm a big branding kind of guy. I've built so much of that around nostalgia. And it's a little bit risky for me to say that the rose colored glasses of nostalgia maybe get in the way for some folks out there of appreciating where we're at now. But yeah, I mean, if you're someone who loves adventure games, you can fill up a Steam wish list and library with more adventure games than you could play in a year's time, no problem. And that's, I mean, compared to what we tend to think of as the golden age, the late '80s, early '90s of adventure games. Sierra and LucasArts were never turning out that much product with that much variety and with that kind of consistent quality, even when they were firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and I think also there's the uh and I've said this on here before, there's a level of thoughtfulness about the design that comes from the people who are making the games being fans and people who played these games themselves, where like it's like they look at they all everybody remembers the uh the boot in King's Quest 5, and they're just like, well, I'll never do that fucking thing, or like the goat and broken sword.
Yeah,
And so there's generally a much more like thoughtful and responsive design, that you know as much as it was said it was a canard, and I do believe it was, but it's like you can't hold to the old man Murray complaints with the games today, because they're made in a very like thoughtful and interesting way, because they're people who have been frustrated by adventure games.
that's right. It's one of the strangest things, like, especially I think with a lot of the Sierra developers, like when you hear stories about just like how many of them weren't necessarily gamers themselves while they were designing adventure games. I mean, you have some like, Josh Mandel came into the company as someone who was a gamer. The Coles had a lot of
Yeah, the
experience with
Coles did.
tabletop stuff and other things, but I don't know if Jim Walls had ever seen a computer game before he sat down to design one. And what do you know?
He
Somehow those games turned out perfect. He
yeah, he
was a
put out
savant.
yeah, you know,
He was,
he
I
sat
mean,
down at the piano and created
started
Mozart.
writing C++. plus plus. It
Yeah.
was just it was just beautiful. No, I mean it's yeah, that level of thought that goes into the modern games in the genre. Yeah, I think gives us an opportunity to power through some of those old man Murray style frustrations of cat hair mustaches. And I mean here, Ben, the cat hair mustache isn't even the worst puzzle in Gabriel Knight 3.
What is?
Uh, what is the worst puzzle in Gabriel Knight 3?
Yeah, Jess, what is the worst puzzle in Gabriel Knight 3?
The worst puzzle in Gabriel Knight 3. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, Jess, I'm asking you, in Gabriel Knight 3, the blood of the damned question mark?
Sacred Blood of the Damned.
Yeah, what is the worst puzzle?
Oh, it's in Gabriel Knight 3.
In
The
blood of the
worst puzzle.
sacred, blood of the damned.
Yeah, okay.
Probably.
So the worst puzzle in Gabriel Knight 3, Blood of the Sacred, Blood of the Damned, is later in the game when you have a window that's stuck that won't open. And you need to like climb through this window, I think, to get into a church, if I recall correctly. And the way that Gabriel Knight gets this window open is he smears hemorrhoid cream on it, which causes the swelling of the window to go down. I don't know
That's
why
pretty
anyone
funny.
has ever talked about the cat hair mustache when there's a puzzle that you use hemorrhoid cream to reduce swelling in a wooden window so you can open it more effectively. That is 1,000 times crazier than a cat hair
Well,
mustache.
is that's later in the game?
Yeah, most people just didn't
Yeah,
get
I was
there.
gonna say, I
Yeah,
just don't think that people made it that far. I think that was
yeah.
probably why.
That's right. I mean, yeah. So yeah, we've learned our lessons from cat hair mustaches and hemorrhoid windows.
That's pretty funny, though.
I
I
mean,
kinda
the thing
like
is,
that puzzle.
that puzzle would be great in like Sam and Max or Day of the Tentacle.
Yeah, that
I mean, yeah, that's actually a really good puzzle concept for a more absurd adventure game.
if it
It's
was
like a
Toonstruck, it would've absolutely
yeah.
worked, and everyone would be like, "That's so funny."
Yeah, because
But
yeah, it's like a thinking outside the box. How do I make something that's swollen less swollen? Oh, I found some hemorrhoid cream. Ha ha ha. But in Gabriel Knight 3, which is a very serious adventure about a baby that's kidnapped by vampires, Ben, you've got to take things seriously.
it's like kinda like Labyrinth, except it's goblins. Um All right. Well, I think we solved it, and time to call up the gravedigger because this
We need to
genre
exhume
is
this body.
yeah, time to exhume it. It's banging. Oh my God, Jess, I hear it. I have my ear to the ground, and I hear help.
Is it like Uma
Grave. Okay,
Thurmaning
okay.
its way out of it, like
Yeah,
with little punches? Yeah.
it's Umaing, it's Oprahing, it's doing it all. Uh,
Yes. As soon as I said Uma, I like had a countdown going in my head on how long it would take you to say Oprah.
it takes
And I was like thinking 10 seconds and you got it in six.
it
So
takes
thank you.
you say Uma to me, and I make a Uma Oprah reference, of course, referencing David Letterman hosting the Oscars, in about 2 seconds. Like it just there's a part of my body. It's like the bus and Speed. If I do not make an Uma Oprah reference, the second that I hear Uma but not or
And
Oprah.
that would Oprah do it though? I feel like Oprah does not trigger that part of my brain. Like,
No,
because
Oprah doesn't
yeah.
trigger that. It's I think it's because Uma comes first in the construction. Uh
Of that wonderful joke that deserves to be talked about years and years later. What's wrong with our brains, Ben? Maybe that should be an episode. Like,
yeah.
why is it, and why should I know that I can say that and that you will immediately say Oprah? Like, that
Yeah.
seems troubling too.
It's
This is why
because
we're
yeah.
co-hosts. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
we're just our destinies were always tied together.
I think we have brains that kind of stick to the same stupid jokes. I think I think I think that's it. Like it's just I mean, okay. All right, so time to get off topic. Jess, you watch Drag Race, right?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, so you remember like this season when Hormona did that stand-up set that was just dog shit?
Yes, Hormona Lisa during a stand-up challenge. I guess it was a
No, it
talent show.
wasn't. It was a talent challenge,
She chose to do
and
this. Yes,
she
she was not
chose to do
forced to
stand
do
up.
this.
She was
Yes.
not. It was not
So
a
yeah,
snatch game, which was
yeah,
also a mess. But
yeah,
it was it was a talent. It was open ended. Do a talent, and she's like, "I'm gonna do stand
yeah.
up," and everyone around her is just like, "What are you talking
Yeah,
about?"
I mean, in a world of drag queens on this show, many
Mhm.
of whom are quite funny, the idea that she would choose to do a comedy show was already a fraught endeavor.
So anyway, when I watch Drag Race, I watch it with my friends. It's a good show to watch with pals.
Yeah,
And when that happened, when we were watching Hormona do the stand up, which was all terrible one liners, I was losing my shit laughing. I was laughing harder and harder and harder every joke that came out and bombed. I was just like, this is so funny because it just kind of looped around for me, like
Uh-huh.
to see someone who spent the entire time remarkably confident that like she like just had this in the bag and then just kind of comes out and just confidently delivers these terrible jokes. I was just losing my shit laughing. And then I'm going to take us even more off topic to say,
Please.
uh, it took me back to a memory of I was in this comedy variety show here in Chicago. And this is in like 2008. This is a long time ago. And there was this awful comedy variety show. And like the type of show that the only people going like that were in the crowd were the performers that were waiting to go up and maybe
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah, yeah.
a couple of their friends. And it was
Uh-huh.
hosted by this guy who was also a dog shit stand up. Just awful. And he goes out and he does his jokes and he like hammers, like just grinds the punchline into the audience and gets no laugh. And then so he says his joke, terrible punchline, and then there's a beat of silence. And this was a tiny theater. And then immediately backstage, like behind the curtain, the actually good stand up that I was there to see, who's going to follow him, just lost his shit laughing. And then the audience started to laugh because then the joke was that the next stand up was just making fun. Like it was silence, then and then we're all like,
Oh
yeah.
no.
All right. Okay. Are we done?
What's the hardest you've ever bombed?
Oh my god. I mean, like, I've been in a couple terrible improv shows and a couple really terrible sketch shows, and the worst thing about that, like it's like I don't have a really good story about it because it's just essentially that like I'm doing sketch or improv and I'm out there and the audience is there and we're doing stuff and no one laughs when they're supposed to. And like, you just have this horrible feeling. This
Uh-huh.
terrible feeling. And it's like and you like that it's like this intense like I have to fix it feeling, and so you start to either go off script if it's scripted to see if you can kind of make it a little funnier, or you really just go ridiculous in your improv, both of which are worse, and the audience can smell it, the audience knows. And I remember a very good instructor I had. He like I was talking to him not specifically about when I bombed, but like I saw somebody else bomb and like I said to him, I was like, "What do you do like if you bomb?" And he's like, "That's when you go as slow as possible. You just slow down and you check in with the person you're doing it with, or just slow down with yourself, if it's stand up or whatever. You just really, really slow it down so you can get control of the situation. And that's what works." And he was right. Like that works, but that is against every single one of
Yes.
your impulses. It
Yeah, no,
is
you
it
are
is
Rush.
turning into the skid when you're like on ice and you're just like, I gotta get out of this. You know. Okay. We're gonna have to save this for another one because we'll maybe even save it for the Patreon because I have an incredible story about seeing something just eat shit. All right, fine.
Yes, please.
This is
Do
going to be
go
our
on.
longest podcast. So, uh, uh, years ago, I was at like a small time film festival, and like tiny, tiny, tiny small time, like not like the tiniest. And there's like and it was all like, kind of local people, and they were all like high schoolers and college students. And so everything was like, a 5-minute little comedy video, and none of them were particularly good, but they were all kind of, charming. And then this one guy who was not particularly well liked by some folks, like he had a movie in it, and it was a short film. And he was somebody that was going to like a film school. It was going to be like a drama, and it was like 15-20 minutes. And so like there's kind of anticipatory buzz,
Oh.
because it's just like, oh, like there's all this, all this goofy crap. Like there was one guy that just did like the Six Flags commercial where it's like the old man
Dun, dun,
stand.
dun,
Yeah,
dun, dun,
yeah.
dun,
Somebody
dun,
just
dun,
did
dun,
that.
dun, dun,
That
dun,
was
dun.
their short film. They just did that. Like
Okay.
like, like that was about the level of quality we're dealing with. But it's
Mhm.
like, all right, this guy, he has this short film, and it's a drama. And so it goes up, and it is awful. And it was like starring people that we knew in town.
Oh no.
So it was like also like, you kind of see like someone would walk in, and they were all acting, but they're not good actors. So that's already kind of funny. Like seeing someone that you recognize, and then like they're acting and they're not an actor. Uh and and then it's like very dramatic and sad, and no one's able to hit anything. And um so the 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 movie has like three parts. It's three little short stories, if I recall correctly. And in the first one, I'm watching it, and I'm like, it's driving me nuts. I'm just like, this is this is something. And then in the second part, this there's a scene, and the first part's also a slog. It's about like a father whose like daughter dies. So it's just like, you're
Boring.
well, it's but it's like a slog in that it's like really depressing, and then
Yeah.
also, not well done. So
Yes, which
it's
is the
like
worst
this
combo.
weird
Like, yeah.
combination. And so there's a weird
Yeah.
energy, because it's like, and it's just a bunch of bad things happening to this guy. They're all really tragic.
Mhm.
But it's done in like not well, so it's kind of like, ugh. But then the second one starts, and it begins, and there's a guy sitting at a desk, and you can see on the camera he's sitting at like a computer desk, and you could see that he's just banging a keyboard, and you could tell, like, you can see the screen, you could see Microsoft Word, and you could just see like HKJ, like, just like he's not, so you could just see
Yeah.
that. And then the phone rings, he picks it up, and then just immediately says, "You're firing me?" And this was not, you know, uh, you know, this isn't one of my proudest moments, perhaps, but maybe it is. Um, I broke. I broke. And my breaking gave permission to the entire audience.
Oh no.
And so now, like, the floodgates are open, because it's just like I'm just sitting there the whole time. I'm just like, and then it just, "You're firing me," and then I'm just like, ah, and then everybody's just laughing, and it just, all this shit happens. We're all just laughing and laughing and laughing. And then the host like comes out, and like makes like dryly says something that makes fun of the movie, and everybody just loses their shit, like just scream laughing. And then at the intermission, uh the I see that guy, and his entire family, which
Oh
occupied a row,
no.
stand up and exit. And I'm like,
Oh no.
so that's
They
the
probably
hardest.
didn't
I,
love
I
him
think
anymore after that.
I think that's the hardest I've ever seen anyone bomb, and I've seen Colin Quinn bomb.
Ooh. Wow.
Anyway,
That's his story and he's sticking to it. And folks, that's why adventure games aren't dead.
they
Ben, over to you.
sure are alive. That's right, Jess. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of Quest, and why didn't you? Because it was great. Why don't you give it a review? 5
Yeah,
stars.
early numbers look great. Yeah, like what we're hearing, the feedback already.
The Q rating is through the QF. Now I've had such a bad day today.
Oh
I've had
man.
such a miserable day today, and there's just something going on up here. Anyway, uh so if
Rate
you
and review
yeah,
us and
5 stars,
suggest us to a
please.
friend. Here's the thing: if everyone listening to us recommends this podcast to 20 people, it will grow our numbers so immensely. I can't tell you. Like, just
Yeah.
take 20 of your closest friends who love adventure games, and it can't overlap with anyone else's 20 friends
Yeah.
who love
Get that
adventure
right.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be the hottest adventure game podcast in North America right now.
That's right. Take that. Now, and you could send us an email at questquestpodcast@gmail.com. And join us next week.
Yes, when we talk about
When we talk about
next week.
next week. King's Quest 5-2, where you just spend more time in the city, you work at that tailor, you find out what's really going on there. Until then, bye.
Bye.